right, guys, so we are doing obviously more ecology stuff. Yesterday, when we talked about the levels of organization, does anyone remember the order from the lowest level? Organism. Wait 1 second. And then when you have a group of organisms of the same species together, population. And when you have several populations all together, biological community. And the biological community and all the abiotic factors, ecosystem. And then when you have that same ecosystem all across the planet, biome. And then when you have all the different biomes together, biosphere. You guys are geniuses. All right, cool. So we are on page 22 of our notes notebooks. And you guys just told me you already know what this is. So biological community, go ahead and highlight that first bullet point anyways. I know you highlighted it yesterday. Yeah, it was part of the things you highlighted. Okay. Sorry, first bullet point, highlight that. So every community is obviously going to be different depending on the environment, and all the organisms that live in the environment are adapted to where they live. There are going to always be some limiting factors in different environments. Limiting factors are either abiotic or biotic, meaning non-living or living, things that can basically either impact the number of organisms in the population or the ability to do reproduction. Okay, so if you had to come up with some things, what do you think are a few examples of biotic limiting factors? Predators is definitely one. What do you mean, like the availability of it? Availability of plants to eat? Sure. Invasive species, absolutely. Anyone else? There's a bunch of us living right now in this room. Humans, we are big time biotic limiting factors. What's another living thing that maybe causes illness? Bacteria, living, obviously things, parasites, mosquitoes, stuff like that. All that stuff would also be considered biotic limiting factors. How about some abiotic limiting factors? What about the water? Okay, availability of water. What else about water could be limiting? The cleanliness, the pollution of it. What else? Oh yeah, definitely, like putting up barriers in the water for sure. Air quality. What? Flooding. Yep. Anyone else? Oh. Weather of any kind really could be limiting, particularly like obviously hurricanes and stuff like that. Fires, earthquakes. Everyone kind of get the idea of the differences. What non-living thing also can cause a lot of deaths? Viruses. There we go. All right, cool, guys. So I would like you guys to highlight under limiting factors the first 3 bullet points. All right, so when we look at the environment, each organism is going to have what's known as a range of tolerance for the different elements and what they're adapted to themselves. This bell curve here is meant to represent that range of tolerance. We're looking at butterflies, that green area in the middle where you see most of the butterflies living. That's what's known as the optimal range. The optimal range is where are the conditions in which the organism is thriving. Okay, this is where they want to be. Good. If we look at it as students, like right now, is everyone relatively comfortable in the temperature that's in this room? I'd say it's probably somewhere around like 76 degrees in here. If it started to go up to like 85 or down to 65, would everyone be in their optimal range anymore as a student? Probably not. We'd start to get stressed, and that's what happens to organisms' bodies as well as we move outside of those ranges to the point where species don't even exist anymore if we get too far outside of that optimal range. So then we're in the zone of intolerance. Everyone comfortable with that? Okay. In your notes, highlight both of the bullet points under range of tolerance. Okay, so ecosystems are always going to be changing. We often see in nature where one biological community will totally replace another one. When that happens, the word that we use to describe that is succession. So it's called ecological succession. There are 2 types. There's primary succession and secondary succession. The main difference between the 2 is whether or not there is soil. Plants live in soil. That's kind of the key thing. So if there is not soil, there is only rocks. that's when we have primary succession. So the idea with primary succession is that you're starting out with bare rock, which you see on the left-hand side. In order to go from bare rock to soil, it takes hundreds of years. So what has to happen is lichen, which is a mix of algae and fungi, they come together and they're going to basically sit on the rocks. They're like microscopic, but sit on the rocks and release digestive enzymes that break down the rock into soil. Okay, this takes a very, very long time. They're what's known as a pioneer species because they're the first ones in the ecosystem. As that continues and the soil starts to get created, then little plants will come in, deposit themselves into the soil, and then that's when we start to see the growth towards an eventual ecosystem. This is like hundreds of years of time. Yeah. Typically, it's going to come from a water source. It's the most likely way it's going to get there. Yeah. Yeah, it's fungi and algae together. Like it's like a symbiotic relationship, mutualistic relationship between. They are given as a collective. They are called lichen, but they're their own separate classifications. Okay. Okay, so that one is primary succession. Is everyone cool with that? Okay, so no soil, we have to make soil hundreds of years long, right? Then we have secondary succession. This is where you had an ecosystem and some sort of disturbance happens that wipes out that ecosystem. So like a fire, a flood, some sort of windstorm, hurricane, whatever, comes by. The key here is that the soil is still there. A fire is gonna burn the shrubs. It's not going to kill, like get rid of the soil. So stuff can just easily be replanted very quickly. Is everyone cool with that? So this is secondary succession where the soil is still there, so it happens really fast. That's the difference between the two. All right, so in your notes, under ecological succession, I would like you guys to highlight the last two bullet points, so the second and third bullet points. Under primary succession, I want you to highlight the first and second and the fourth and fifth bullet points. And then hop down also to the seventh bullet point there. So the seventh bullet point is talking about a climax community, which is the ultimate goal of an ecosystem. That's the most stable and mature community that can exist. It takes a long time to get to that point, and scientists honestly don't actually believe that a climax community can actually be achieved because there are disturbances that happen all the time within ecosystems. But it's not really the point. It's possible, but rare. Okay, so next we're going to talk about terrestrial biomes. Does anyone know what terrestrial means? Land, yeah, land biomes. Okay, so can anyone tell me the difference between weather and climate? Go ahead. Weather's what? Short term, yeah. So weather's like time, place at this exact time, like a short term thing. So today the weather is, it's kind of cool out, right? Not too bad. Sunny. Tomorrow the weather's going to be rainy, right? Overall, okay, the climate for Florida for an entire year or several years is going to be an average of all of the temperatures and all of the precipitation. Everyone cool with that? All right. So could you please highlight under effects of climate, the first bullet point about weather, and then also highlight under climate that first bullet point as well. So climate also includes temperature and precipitation, like I just said. Okay, so this picture is just to remind everyone that our Earth is on an axis, tilted, and because of that, different parts of the Earth are going to be hit by the sun at different angles, and depending on the angle is going to result in different temperatures, which makes sense, right? The sun's what gives heat to the Earth. So at the equator, that's the most direct strike from the sun, which is why you're going to find the warmest environments in those areas that are closest to the equator. As you move north and south to the poles, that's the least amount of direct sunlight, which is why those parts of our planet are the coldest for now, right now. Okay, so that's the idea with that. And there are different biomes, major land biomes on our planet. There's 9 of them. You don't need to memorize them at all, just like letting you know they exist. The way we typically classify biomes is based on the plants. Okay, so we look at the plants. Also, obviously, we look at the climate, but the plants and what's available there are the main defining characteristics. This is just a video, not a video, a picture of where you can find some of the different biomes. On the bottom right-hand corner, it says the mountain zones and polar ice are considered non-biomes. They're not considered biomes for different reasons. So mountains, well, let me start back a little bit. Do you remember yesterday how we talked about the ecosystem of a school, how there's all similar conditions in all schools across the planet, and that's why we said they could all be a biome? With mountains, because the altitudes are so different in the various mountain ranges, the conditions are very different between them, so we can't group them all into one. Okay, so we don't consider mountains a biome for that reason. And then polar ice regions are made of ice, so they don't have soil, lack of plants, we don't consider it a biome. Everyone good with that? Okay, so I'm gonna have you highlight those last two, under major land biomes, highlight the first bullet point, and then under the other terrestrial areas, highlight both of those bullet points. And then flip your page. All right, we just did land ecosystems, now we're gonna do aquatic ecosystems. So there's two types of aquatic, freshwater and saltwater. Amazingly to me, of all of the 100% of water on our planet, only 3% of it is freshwater and only 1% of that is available to us. Most of it, the other 2% is trapped in glaciers for now, till it goes into the oceans. But I always just find that like a really crazy thing, especially since water is so important. So obviously our major freshwater ecosystems are ponds, lakes, streams, rivers, and wetlands. I want you to highlight that first bullet point, please. I know you guys already know that, but we're gonna go through them. So the different parts of a river are not super important, but there's a picture with sediment in the mouth of the river emptying into lake, ocean, whatever it is. With lakes and ponds, there's two vocab words that you guys need to know. So we have oligotrophic and eutrophic lakes. Oligotrophic are going to be nutrient poor lakes, meaning they don't have food basically in them, so nothing wants to live there. No food, nothing else eats, okay? Eutrophic is basically, it's like true food, nutrient rich. So there's gonna be a lot of different organisms that live in those regions. So I would like you to highlight the second and third bullet point under lakes and ponds, and actually highlight the fourth bullet point as well. So we divide lakes and ponds into 3 zones based on how much sunlight they get and how far it gets through the water. So here's a picture of the different zones. There's the littoral zone, which is closer to the shoreline, the limnetic zone, which is basically the center of the lake. The profundal zone is going to be the deeper parts, and benthic zone is the shoreline all the way onto the lake floor. The key 2 things that you guys need to know here are the photic zone and the aphotic zone. Does anyone remember what photo means? Sun or sunlight, okay? So the photic zone is where sunlight is able to penetrate through the water. Any organism that is autotrophic has to live in the photic zone. Those are the producers. So where do you think the consumers are? In the photic zone, right? The stuff that lives in the aphotic zone is going to be stuff that is going to be feeding off of like the carcasses for the most part. The stuff that lives in the depth of the ocean or even lakes and stuff is not going to necessarily need the sunlight. It's just going to feed on stuff that floats to the bottom. Everyone good with that? All right. So that's all you have to highlight for that. Then we have transitional aquatic ecosystems. The idea behind transitional is that we're going from freshwater into saltwater. So this happens when rivers run into the ocean, or there's any kind of mixing happening of that brackish water, which is both salt and freshwater. So wetlands are a great example of a transitional aquatic ecosystem. We have wetlands in Florida. Does anyone know what the main park is called? The Everglades, exactly. Lots of diversity there. That's a marshy, swampy area, which is great for supporting aquatic life. And then we also have estuaries. Estuaries are where the rivers run into the ocean, which again is going to give us brackish water. The organisms that live in these environments are really well adapted to both salt and freshwater ecosystems, which is great for them because it gives them more adaptations, better survival chances, all that good stuff. where Philippi Creek runs into the Gulf would be an example of an estuary, okay? All right, there's an example. You can see obviously sediment and also the mixing of the water there. Then we have marine ecosystems. Wait, I think I want you to highlight stuff. I do. Under transitional aquatic ecosystems, highlight both bullet points. Under wetlands, the first bullet point. And under estuary, first and third. Okay, so if you see the word marine ecosystem, what type of water are we talking about now? Salt water only, okay? So we have intertidal zones. These are where the ocean is gonna meet the land. Any organisms that live here have to be adapted to the tides going in and out, meaning they can survive above water and below it. So obviously they're going to be fit for their environment there. Starfish are an example, there's sea urchins, stuff like that. If we look at an open ocean system, again, we have that photic zone and that aphotic zone, which I would like you to highlight both of those, please. So actually under the open ocean ecosystem, you're gonna highlight every other one, starting at the first one. So first, third, fifth, and seventh. And for intertidal zones, I forgot to tell you, but highlight both of those as well. So does anyone know the name of the deepest part of the ocean without looking? Marianas Trench. It's 10,911 meters deep that we know of, and which is obviously very, very deep. As you go from the photic zone into the aphotic zone, what's happening to the temperature of the water? It's going down, right? It's decreasing significantly. In the abyssal zone, which is the deepest part of the ocean, it is freezing cold down there, okay? Very, very cold. Also, there's not a lot of light. I'm sure you guys have seen videos, or even in Finding Nemo with the anglerfish with the antenna and the little light. The bioluminescence is a way for predators to attract organisms in that dark area, basically. And then the benthic zone is just the shoreline, like as it goes down to the ocean floor. All right, and then finally we have our coral reefs. Coral reefs and tropical rainforests are pretty much the most diverse ecosystems on our planet. The great thing about coral reefs is that they provide natural barriers along continents, which is great for protecting shorelines from erosion. It's also good if you're a boater and you get seasick, and the coral reefs help with like keeping the waves down. You're typically going to find them in warm, shallow waters. We have them around the Florida Keys, stuff like that. I actually went to the Great Barrier Reef 3 years ago now. It was super beautiful, but unfortunately, because coral reefs are so sensitive to changes in the environment, the temperature changing in the water, the pollution in the water, sunscreen even is going to have an impact on them. So when I went to the Great Barrier Reef, we actually had to go out further. Like they were having all tourists go to the exterior islands because the interior ones were so damaged and bleached that basically it doesn't look like this, it looks like white, which is like one, a problem obviously for like tourism purposes, but the main problem is that stuff can't live there if there's nothing to live in or feed off of. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you guys a video real quick of, I'm going to highlight the last bullet point in the notes, but I'm going to show you a video real quick about coral bleaching. And then we'll be done. It's very quick. This is a little bit dated because I think it's from like 2017. We had signed the Paris Accord at that point, then it got unsigned, and now we've rejoined again. So hopefully this kind of stuff will happen.
We've now had 3 major bleaching events on the Great Barrier Reef. In '98, 2002, and again just recently in 2016. We zigzagged along the whole length in a helicopter and fixed wing plane. We put about 100 people underwater. The extent and severity of this bleaching is off the chart. Typically, a bleached coral is nutritionally compromised. But this time around, we discovered an additional phenomenon. Many of the corals we surveyed were already dead. They actually cooked, and that's because the temperatures this time around were so extreme.
Already in 2016, severe coral bleaching has also been recorded across the Pacific Ocean, in Fiji, across the Indian Ocean, in the Maldives and the Seychelles, and even in the southern Red Sea. Similar events are predicted across the Caribbean and Micronesia. In a year in which the impacts of heat stress on the global ocean have reached unprecedented extremes, as the distribution of marine species continues to change, as storm surges continue to intensify, as sea ice and glacier melt accelerate, and as sea level rise and human displacement intensifies.
Countries around the world in Paris last year have committed to a rapid transition away from fossil fuels towards more sustainable, renewable energy.
Paris marked the moment when the world finally decided to heed the ever-rising mountain of evidence that had been piling up for years, and began instead to galvanize our focus.
S'il y avait une seule chose à réussir pour appliquer l'accord de Paris, c'est la réduction des émissions de gaz à effet de serre. Pour augmenter la résilience de l'océan, il faudrait bien sûr lutter contre le réchauffement climatique, donc monter en puissance sur les énergies renouvelables, y compris les énergies renouvelables marines.
Okay, that is it.